And good afternoon. Welcome into Market Talk on this final day of March 31st. Thank you so much for joining us here and making us part of your day. I'm your host, Jesse Allen. Find us online, markettalkag.com. That's our home on the web, markettalkag.com, where you can find us. All of our streaming sources are there, the latest news of agriculture, all of our social media links, and much more. It's all on our website, markettalkag.com. Well, the day we've been waiting for, USDA quarterly grain stocks and prospective plantings numbers out this morning. Definitely some surprises, definitely a big market mover, and a lot of things to discuss here to help us go through everything and make sense of today's trade. Our good friend Bryan Doherty, Senior Market Advisor with Total Farm Marketing, is with us on this Thursday. Bryan, good afternoon to you, sir, on what I'm sure has been a busy day after those report numbers came out. Definitely a lot of things to take a look at and sift through, and I'm sure you were probably fielding quite a few calls after those reports.
Yeah, it's one of the more, I guess, watched reports for the year. They kind of sneak up on us pretty quick as March flies by and we get ready for spring. Um, yeah, so the question was, um, is this a surprise? I'm going to say no, but it is based on the pre-report market estimates
Hmm.
that the corn acres would be down and soybean acres up. So when we look at kind of the big picture and say, hey, what does it look like now? We're getting closer to sort of that 90-90. And that was talked about, kind of a winter. Could we get to 90 million acres of corn, 90 beans? Well, right now it's almost 91 million acres of corn and 89.490 or 89.5 million of corn. So we not only got to it, we exceeded it. Not a
Hmm.
shocker though. Just the fall, I think, was challenging for some to whether they wanted to chase fertilizer prices or just wait it out. I think they waited out. The other thing too is you're going to lose some corn acres, I think, in the South Dakota, North Dakota region, Northwest Minnesota, to some type of smaller grains, and you just don't have the workhorses. Things can change if winter wheat conditions aren't great. That might bring back some corn acres as farmers quickly switch to corn. The other thing too, after today, all of a sudden you've got beans down 50 cents on new crop. You've got corn up close to 30 cents, 80-cent swing. The ratio right now is 2.08. That's really telling farmers if they're going to make a decision, they should plant corn now.
Yeah, very, very true. And those numbers you mentioned, yeah, kind of near that 90 and 90 mark on quart of beans. And a few different things to unpack here on the video feed. I got the numbers up for us. I mean, you look at it, you think about it, and yes, I think these acres definitely could change. This is kind of just that baseline starter projection to throw some numbers in the calculations here. I look as well, cotton acres up 9%, 12.2 million. I think that's a big number to look at as well.
Hmm.
Some of those southern fringe states for corn and beans, but then, wheat as well. You mentioned it, maybe looking towards the Dakotas and Northwest Minnesota. I know there was a drop in spring wheat acreage on the report, but I agree. I think some of that could come back here as we get closer to really getting into the fields here in the next couple of weeks, Brian.
Absolutely. So it's ever changing. Um, I haven't had enough time to go through and do a state by state breakdown, but I'm pretty sure
Mhm.
I'm going to find what we talked about where some of these more fringe states. As I've talked to seed dealers in sort of the core, the Midwest, I think many of those farmers were locked into the rotation. But remember, it doesn't take a big change. If you think about, driving past, I've used this analogy before. 90 fields, you switch one of those or two. That's a little more visually seems like it's doable. So,
Mhm. Very,
um,
very true. Yeah, very, very true. Uh, I'll flip over to the quarterly grain stocks, and we'll talk about that and the implications there as well. I mean, corn came in pretty much as expected. Beans a bit higher, wheat a bit lower. What are your thoughts with the grain stocks numbers that we saw today?
excellent. Now, couple of comments on that. So the corn number came in a little less, 0.4%, but it was still 35 million bushels less. Um, Strong basis toward the end of summer, early fall, right away into harvest. It just, to me, continues to tell the story that there's either too much corn carried in or the demand was stronger that it was pulling corn out of farmers' hands toward the end of summer and especially into early fall and harvest. Did farmers really need to sell corn? Now it's good cash flow year, probably not, but nonetheless, I think the report echoed a little more what we were leaning toward from the perspective of tighter supplies, and it showed up today Beans, on the other hand, 38 million more. Um, I'm going to say just kind of let's pump the brakes a little bit on that. Remember, we lost about a month's worth of export activity. So we need to make up for that month. And I think the export sales as of late have. So I think the trend and trajectory of export sales is very, very helpful and supportive. So I don't want to read too much into the B number. That Hurricane Ida event was that was just a day of reckoning down in the Gulf.
Yeah, very, very true. We look at all these numbers, we get the market digesting everything here today, Brian, and we move forward. We'll see what Friday brings us. But overall, out of what you saw today and the reaction, what are your thoughts here, near term and a little farther out after these numbers? Now, do you feel that there's going to be any shifts in the market direction at all here as we move forward?
The new crop corn certainly has a supportive tone. The old crop really didn't do much. It's kind of stuck. And if I look at the May contract, or even July, but well, let's look at either. July corn closed today at 733. Back on March 4th, the mark was at 733. So in theory, it's pretty much a month has gone by and it hasn't moved. It's been higher, it's been lower. So it looks like we're maybe leveling off on the old crop, although a good close today, kind of again probing that top side, but unable to hold the gains. I think that's just more traders taking strong gains out of the market during the day. You got a big pop like that. If you bought corn before the report, you were instantly rewarded. So I think there's a little bit more of a trade going on there. That December corn, boy, to knock it at new highs today, good strong close, new high close. What's it going to take to knock it off the rails there? I don't really know. Maybe a big crop in Brazil, second crop. Maybe just something happens in Ukraine where we don't. I don't know. To me, it looks like that market's still running too much discount to the old crop. It probably needs to get towards $7.
Well, I know as well on the day Thursday, Brian, on top of all the USDA numbers, crude oil taking it on the chin, down over 5%. The talk of releasing more from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, that's weighing on the markets, weighed on bean oil, especially here today. What's your thoughts on that news and what we're seeing in the crude oil market here on top of these USDA numbers?
It's an interesting world because on the one hand, you talk about reserves, and I think it's like 1 million barrels a day on average, or some number that is like 5% of the daily use for
Mhm.
I don't remember 30 or 60 days. So it's something to maybe sort of patch over the bigger uptrend. Um, which kind of surprises me because the crude oil has really, I think, been under some pressure since COVID outbreaks in China. And OPEC probably starting April 1st, pushing another 400 some thousand barrels a day. So maybe between the two, you got an extra million barrels a day um, that might be out there. I don't know if it changes the global macro picture at all. I would think high prices will cure high prices, and there will be a return to more pumping. But we've talked about this before. I'm still not getting any sense that the U.S. producer is jumping through cartwheel or doing cartwheels and jumping through hoops to produce more. Um, there's just this other extreme out there that that doesn't want any fuel, and so we'll see which way the administration goes on this. Who knows what 6 months or a year will look like with Russia? I mean, maybe in 30 days this all goes away and everybody kind of figures out how to get along, and Russia supplies what it needs. I don't know, but it sure is precarious. I wouldn't be surprised if crude oil continues to move higher. I just think that as we come out of COVID and hit the driving season and people are sick of being kind of boxed in, they'll pay the extra for gas. They'll spend it less elsewhere, and they're going to get out and do things.
Definitely. Another thing as well, before everything got going on Thursday, we had weekly export sales. You look at those numbers. I know China stepped in, bought a net 21.8 million bushels of old and new crop beans. They were a big buyer of beef as well. Any thoughts with weekly export sales that you saw here this morning?
I think they continue to exemplify just tightening world inventories across the board. So we can talk about acreage today and some stocks, but the bottom line is what is the appetite for the world? And these are high prices, and we're still seeing the export market really perform what I'm going to say very well. Big picture perspective, you just can't get away from it. We like today's numbers. The beans continue to see, they had a slowdown there, but they continue to see daily numbers that are very solid. Um, it's a little disappointing. The corn number, 25 million metric tons in the old crop today. Maybe that's why old crop corn prices kind of didn't have the punch to really push higher. If you think about the stocks number was down, what do we say about 35 million bushels? Well, today's export sales number, kind of a clunker. That might have been right there. If it'd come in something a little bit heavier there. Um, I think big picture perspective, though, my goodness, things we got to be a little careful of as far as tightness. Anything comes out of Brazil weather-wise, which right now I would summarize the Brazil weather for second crop corn, Jesse, is when you use the words okay or the letters okay again, it's okay, the word okay. Um, I don't know if they're on pace for something special. It's pretty early in the season, but it's what I'm not saying. I'm not saying, oh man, there's a dry pattern that's really starting to wreak havoc. I'm not on that bandwagon right now.
Well, Brian, let's shift our conversation to livestock. Hogs, we got the quarterly hogs and pigs report yesterday. Inventory down 2%. We started higher briefly, and then this hog market kind of just reversed. What happened in this hog market today?
This might be more of a in recent week, buy the rumor, sell the fact. We've talked a lot about PRRS. We've talked about high corn prices, feed prices, farmer hog operations, uh, making some maybe tougher decisions or again, just kind of disease issues. And here we are 2% lower. So the market's had some pretty good run though. I mean, we're looking historically at high prices, and today's trade activity was not impressive. It was a bearish key reverse in some of the charts.
Mhm.
Something to be watched when you're at the high end of a price range, a high end of a rally. I wouldn't say we've really had the strong acceleration, but looking at the June contract today, 127.32 high, and you finish down around 120.37. That's a big drop off.
Mhm.
That's a pretty negative signal. So the key on any kind of reversal, Jesse, isn't the day of. That's the setup. It's really the next few days after. If the market finds follow through tomorrow, then it looks like maybe a high is in. If it doesn't, market basically went down, tried to fill a gap today. If it doesn't, if it snaps right back and consolidates and eventually takes that high out, then it doesn't really mean much. But is the first step in a pretty big warning signal that you had a market considered overbought. Stochastics crossover, providing a sell signal, end up with a bearish key reversal. You got the bullish news into the marketplace again. Buy the rumor, sell the fact. Um, hogs may have seen their high.
On the cattle side today, I know feeder cattle down sharply, but live cattle for the most part held in there today. We'll call moderate losses. We look at cash trade pretty much steady with last week. We're getting some more activity on this Thursday. What's your thoughts on the cattle market here today?
I like the way it's holding. I like the deferred months. I want to be bullish cattle. They are stuck. As an example, in June around 137, 138. It is stuck where it has been. We can go back to mid-November. We were at 137, 138. So we've been higher, we've been lower. We've dealt with COVID breakouts. We've dealt with, that's what hit the market back in midwinter. And then now you got this China COVID, you've got high energy prices. The cattle market has been kind of pushed at and pulled at from every angle. I think if you look at the cattle on feed report, if there was a surprise, I was surprised the total number was just a little more than I think I would have expected. But I also have to realize that on feed counts cattle that maybe shouldn't be on feed when you have dry pasture conditions, poor wheat ground. I can see where that number might have been a little bit on the bearish side, but ultimately, I haven't found any rationale to expect that this herd size is growing.
Definitely something we're going to have to watch and see. Dairy market today, seeing
Mm.
some green on the screen there, especially on the class three milk side. What's your thoughts of what's going on in dairy, Brian?
Got hit up pretty hard the last couple or 3 days. It really did. It corrected down hard, reversed some yesterday, and then some follow through today. Um, what we've seen in the dairy industry is just continued strong demand. But I think the bigger story in dairy, the last production report showed that we're not increasing the herd. Same thing with cattle. You've got high feed costs and you've got a labor issue, got high labor costs and lack of labor. So some of the dairies that we've talked to, and I think they're symptomatic or provide sort of an example of a lot of dairies, is that you're you're benefiting from these high prices, but you've got inputs right up behind it, and you've got an undependable or is that the right word? Undependable? Yeah, undependable labor force right now. There isn't like this pool you can reach into. That's scaring producers. Um, what do you do if you don't have enough labor?
Yeah,
And,
that's
and
something.
the jobs report yesterday showed that there's
Mhm.
plenty of jobs available if you want one. Um, doesn't have to be in a dairy.
Yeah, that's something to watch as well. Good points there, Brian. Before we run out of time, floor is yours. Any final thoughts you have for us after all the news items we saw in the market trade today?
Yeah, just keep in mind it's March 31st. The market had more information to work with today, and what it's probably what we didn't see today. We saw corn shoot right out of it looked like it was going to limit higher and lock up, and it didn't. Okay. So I think there's some hesitation to think, hey, let's just kind of hold on here. I think the traders took their gains. I think there's a firm undertone to it. I will make the argument though, for those who have been on the sideline and patiently waiting. We even kind of promoted talking about, we think that December corn can get to $7. We are getting close enough. This is horseshoes and hand grenades here. We're close enough. 683. If you're thinking about making any kind of sales, get started. Call me up next week if it's higher and yell at me, and then I'll probably tell you to sell some more. It's a good level. Um, if we need to cover it, we'll look at that, but I think you wanna look at that, and the same thing with beans. Beans got a warning shot across the bow that the supply could be on the rise, and if you are looking at new crop and had made sales there, or been waiting or wanted to add to, get her done. Don't worry about today, look at the bigger picture price. 14.20, it's not 15, but it's still 14.20.
A lot of great things to consider. If folks need some advice, as you mentioned, they can give you a call. They can reach out to you guys there at Total Farm Marketing very easily. How can they do that, Brian?
I would just ask them, give us a quick call, 800-334-9779. And make sure that if you call in, ask for me so that I can address what we talked about in the show. We got a great team, but sometimes we get a call from somebody and they're sort of asking somebody about what I said in the show, and it's confusion. So just ask for me, 800-334-9779. You can always shoot me an email at Bryan at totalfarmmarketing.com or take a look at our website. Lots of ways to reach us.
TotalFarmMarketing.com, that website as well, and that number and everything listed there. With that, Brian Doherty with Total Farm Marketing, I appreciate the time and the insight as always, sir. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
Yes, sir. Do appreciate it. Thank you, Jesse.
Brian Doherty with Total Farm Marketing, our guest today on Market Talk. That's going to do it for the show on this Thursday, March 31st. Find us online, markettalkag.com. I'm Jesse Allen. Have a great afternoon.